Hi, my name's Alyssa, and in the next few minutes, I'm going to explain Black maternal mortality, what it is, why it's important, and how it can be related to philosophy of science. So first, what exactly is Black maternal mortality? Maternal death or maternal mortality is defined by WHO or the World Health Organization as, quote, the death of a woman while pregnant or within 42 days of termination of pregnancy, irrespective of the duration and site of the pregnancy, from any cause related to or aggravated by the pregnancy or its management, but not from accidental or incidental causes. Basically, Black maternal death or maternal mortality is when a mother dies, but not because of the actual pregnancy, but because of its mismanagement. So this project focuses specifically on Black women because Black maternal mortality has become especially prevalent and a spotlight issue here in the States recently, aka the past 5 years. According to research, non-Hispanic Black women make up only 14.6% of live births, but represent 35.5% of pregnancy-related deaths, putting their risk of dying of pregnancy at 3.2 times higher than that of non-Hispanic white women. In other words, Black women in America give birth to a proportional amount of children based on our percent of the population, but Black mothers die at a rate more than double what it should be. For a long time, scientists attributed these statistics to poor, unwed teenage mothers who had a lesser chance of receiving proper health care, having insurance, regular prenatal visits, etc. Interestingly enough, though, these misconceptions were debunked by the important realization that the Black maternal mortality rate actually was cutting across class lines. So in 1992, the CDC, also known as the Center for Disease Control, conducted a watershed study and pulled from nearly 1 million previously unavailable birth records, which showed that infants born to college-educated Black parents were 2 times as likely to die in childbirth as infants born to similarly educated white parents. This allowed the problem to be attributed to the shared experience of African American womanhood in America. So in 1992, another prominent Dr. Arlene Geronimus from the University of Michigan proposed the theory of weathering to help explain Black maternal mortality. She believed that a kind of toxic stress triggered the premature deterioration in the bodies of African American women and was a consequence of the repeated exposure to a climate of racial discrimination and insults. It's kind of like if you left clothes out on the clothesline and all the weather got to them. The lightning, rain, snow, and sun would weather the clothes and make them less strong and available for you to wear. So now that we know what it is, why does Black maternal mortality matter? Obviously, Black maternal mortality is an issue because it describes deaths which are almost always preventable. Specifically, the high rate of incidence of maternal mortality among Black women is staggering based on data that has been collected and represents a serious inequality in treatment and care across the country. In a day and age where people try to tout the U.S. as post-racial or colorblind society, it is essential to investigate what kind of inequalities persist, where they come from, and how to move toward an equal opportunity for all. So how does it relate to philosophy of science? Well, there are a number of perspectives that can be applied to the issue of Black maternal mortality. The first is the Strong program, whose central idea is the symmetry principle, but also sought to analyze particular scientific theories in their relation to social circumstances. This relativist perspective says that scientific ideas will reflect the interests of a social group. In this way, one can assume that medicine, over time, while ironically using the bodies of Black women to found and advance gynecology, the largely white male field has done little in the interests of Black women. We see evidence of this based on the reports of just how poorly the American healthcare system treats Black women and their children. This topic flows nicely into feminist philosophy of science, which began to develop in the late 20th century. Basically, the theory says that science traditionally has excluded women and perpetuated inequalities between men and women. Evidence is found in examples such as primatology, where the introduction of women researchers led to incredibly important new discoveries about female primates. This is especially important in gynecology and pregnancy because men usually cannot relate to the sensation of pregnancy and at times had difficulty diagnosing the pain that women felt. It is also important to mention the feminist epistemology, which talks about who does science and the ways in which knowing can be gendered. Who is doing the science affects its ability to be done well. To go back to the primatology, the female researchers all had their own experiential knowledge of womanhood, which led them to be especially interested in the female primate experience as far as mating. Without their own experience as women, they would have had the same standpoint as the men, not being interested and ultimately not finding out the information that was essential to their research. It is also important to mention a more radical feminist position called standpoint epistemology. It stresses situatedness of an investigator or knower, their physical nature, location, and status in the world. In other words, situatedness, or where you are, impacts the way you see things. Just like in this picture, both artists see the model as he's standing on the podium, but you can tell that their drawings represent very different parts of him, different aspects, different qualities, and different features. In this case, Black pregnant women have a very unique situatedness. Their position in American society gives them knowledge about ways in which the discrimination they experience and the stress of racism may impact their own lives and the lives of their children as well. Standpoint epistemology argues that their marginalized position grants them incredibly valued knowledge, which, when applied to Black maternal mortality, could be the key in fixing such a wide range issue. The last position I'll mention is called scientific realism. In his article, Experimentation in Scientific Realism, Ian Hacking articulates the belief that science describes the world exactly as it is. This is a contentious point of view because others believe that science can only describe the world as we see it. In other words, they believe that our perception is clouded by our own humanity. Either way, this matters because of the ways that scientific thinking has a real impact on policies, laws, and opportunities. In the context of Black maternal mortality, a striking example of scientific realism impact is the way that risk factors are commonly described. One condition, called peripartum cardiomyopathy, or heart failure in pregnant women, lists African American descent as a cause of the disease. Although PPCM is more prevalent in Black women, the true risk factor is racism and discrimination that Black women experience, and not an inherent or genetic issue passed down among Black women. So hopefully this video has given some important context and information not only about Black maternal mortality, but also about philosophy of science and how it can be applied to the issues in our everyday lives.